This is the One Deeper podcast, where we talk about cognitive science and AI. From the moment it first hit the internet, ChatGPT has been taking over everyone's imagination. It's got people all over the world excited. It's got people concerned. It's the entire spectrum. I've had several friends who work in completely unrelated, non-AI fields ask me how they can use this in their lives, in their schoolwork, in their businesses. There's a lot of interest in this. So I thought it would be nice to talk about technologies like ChatGPT, large language models, and what they can do and what they can't do, what it takes to build them, etc. So I'm joined on this episode by Chris Emmery. He's an assistant professor at Tilburg University's Department of Cognitive Science and AI. He teaches several courses, including language and AI. We go over a lot of stuff, some technicalities, but a lot of general, just talking about AI and language and the cost of doing these huge AI projects and what the benefits might be. It's a wide-ranging and awesome conversation. And I hope you enjoy it. And as always, thank you for listening. All right. I think we're live.
All right.
Chris, what's up?
Hello. Yeah, doing well. You?
I'm good, man. Thanks for joining me today, and finally got this thing working.
Yeah.
So, all right, we can do this any way you wanted to do it, but the fundamental thing that I want to talk about was large language models, right? So, how should we begin? What do you think is a good way to start? Maybe how did this endeavor, the history of this endeavor, maybe trying to get people, because there's a chatbot history there and a Turing test history there.
Yeah.
But I don't know, up to you. How do you wanna approach this?
Well, so there obviously there's a whole history to interpreting language using computers and then trying to pick up patterns from that. And at some point, people figured out that if you have a sort of representation, so initially people were mostly concerned with if you look at the very basic sort of foundations of language models, this is just encoding some probabilities over word occurrences, right?
This a little bit closer to your mouth.
Sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is if you track sequences and probabilities over word sequences, and you know the probability that a particular word occurs once another word occurs, so what is the probability that this word follows after the next, you can unroll these kind of things, and that results in a probabilistic language model, right? So you have an encoding of how likely certain words are, and you can use that to sort of sample from this, right? It's a distribution over words and word contexts. So that was the way beginning sort of fundamentals of this. It's I don't know if you're familiar with Markov models, but that's sort of where the initial generative language models are have their origins, as far as I'm aware, at least. And then so this has always been kind of stuck in, because this is obviously the best way to test if you have a model that actually encodes language well, is to sample from it and see if the output is coherent, and if at some point you have to introduce that it also responds to input, right? But even the sort of very basic part of generating the language is already pretty impressive if you can do it coherently for more than a few sentences, right? Because it's not only if you just sample from a very, let's call it a stupid model with not too much memory in terms of what came before, it could go whatever direction is probable, right? I'm not sure if you ever tried the autofill on your phone, for shits and giggles. Just click the middle one, And that one is also a bit trained on your language use, right? So you can see that it tries to input certain, or it tries to generate what you would say given almost no context, right? Maybe a few words or something. But those things go nowhere, typically, right? So this encoding of context and sort of remembering what the context was a pretty big challenge for a while. From sort of the probabilistic foundations, at some point we went into the deep learning era, in which we are still at the moment. And you got a bit of a small hints of that it was picking up, or at least remembering some of these contexts, right? You could have it write small pieces of poetry that would even like and this is just to give you some view of how far we're within like 5 years or something. That like even like 2 or 3 sentences following up that were still coherent in terms of topic or whatever was mentioned before was already like, wow, that's impressive. And so the initial deep learning models had this problem that tracking of states was very difficult. So you could sample from them and it would be fairly, it would look like language, but if you looked at like a very small window. And now currently we're a bit, this was sort of, recurrent neural networks and LSTMs. And now we're in the transformer period.
Right. Okay. So wait a second.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. But
no worries.
Okay. So I think there's maybe it's worth sort of recognizing that there's a substantial difference between a generative model and the sort of stuff that we're used to doing with text. I mean, AI, like machine learning is like, let's just say text classification. Like the difference between like classifying a text in terms of like a very simple saying, okay, this is a happy context or sad or whatever it is, and then from something that can actually generate its own sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a difference there.
It is a bit of a difference. So I think the nuances aren't too different. So
talk directly.
Oh, sorry. Encode
because it's like one directional.
I keep
right?
turning.
Yeah.
So encoding at the end, and especially in neural networks, the representation at some point boils down to whatever you want to classify. And classifying the next word is just a classification over a very large vocabulary of potential words, right? So it's not that different.
Right. Okay.
It's just a very, very complex classification problem.
Gotcha.
So in the same way that you would classify a particular label, classifying the next word is essentially the same in this sense. Obviously, there's a bit of overhead in terms of things that you need to track to actually do this, and also the input. But yeah, so that's why many of the architectures that are used for text classification and generating language are essentially the same.
Okay.
You don't need we're past the sort of time where we needed very tailored algorithms to do particular things. And I think in essence, a lot of these things have overlap anyway. So even with the probabilistic models, many things in essence were the same. It's just people tried to engineer particular architectures to accommodate for particular problems, right? Like a sequential classification task where you have to label, like let's say every word with something, part of speech tag or something. Let's say it's maybe some local sentiment or something, So it's not the whole sentence, but it's per word. The score goes up or something. You need to track this somehow, and hence the encoding needs to be fitting for this. And once we got into representation learning, which is essentially what deep learning is, this was all sort of general. You could just use this whatever architecture for sequence classification, for document classification, for etc. As long as you manage to have these internal states represented in some way, concatenation or whatever, so that in the end it would boil down to a small matrix over which you can do some classification, it would be fine, right? Problem was that most of the recurrent models weren't really generalizable, or at least not, you couldn't really transfer what you learned in one model to another model.
Maybe it's good just to give a brief idea of what a recurrent network is, because I know, but like some people might be like,
yeah, sure. Well, to keep it simple, I guess recurrent models encode language over time. So it's a sequential model that goes over every input word, encodes it somehow, and then it remembers this initial encoding of like the first word, second word, it encodes it somehow. There's a bunch of weights in there, and then it tries to aggregate those weights, and it does that for every word. So it's a very long tracking of weights.
Just like trying to figure out what comes next in the sequence. Is that essentially? Is that what's going on?
So that's it. You could use it for this, but what it's doing. It's indeed tracking the sequence and whatever. If you then do a classification of some sort at the end, you basically still get a small matrix, but it's it accounted for all the weights before. So it's a bit different from a feed-forward neural network or something, where everything is chucked into the same network and out comes some classification. This is basically a small feed-forward network per time step, so per sequence step, and then sort of maybe summing or averaging or whatever at each step, meaning that once you are at the end and you need to decide, was this a good classification, and need to account for the error to actually fit the model, you need to backpropagate, right, the error into all these states. So it's very costly in terms of training. You can't really distribute it either, because it needs to have all these weights, some memory of all these weights and all these steps that it took to then backpropagate the error. And so, as I was saying, these models therefore were very tricky to train, and that some PhDs spend like 4 to 5 years in that particular time span, just like fine-tuning RNNs and LSTMs to work on like one particular task. Yeah. And then like, oh, okay, good, we have state-of-the-art results now, and then it wasn't usable for anything else. So it's a bit of a waste of everyone's time, I think. They were very finicky to train, and then you couldn't really plug them into any other task. So it's not like, okay, I trained this on doing like next word prediction. Now I can take that set of weights that I trained and just use it for some other task.
Okay. So this is a fundamental problem sort of in AI right now in general, right? So when people say we want intelligence, or like we want to build this general intelligence, what they mean is something that can perform a bunch of different things in all kinds of different domains, right? But this is still kind of hard. I mean, there's like the Google Gato thing that can do a bunch of stuff, but
yeah, I think AGI has a very particular framing of what is AI and what it's supposed to be doing, and that it should be, all knowledgeable and surpass us in terms of cognitive functions and etc. So it's a bit of a long reach, I think, from where we're now. This is, you could say that indeed you eventually there would be a single sort of, whatever architecture. If you use some sort of brain analogy, then this thing can also do a lot of things, right? And then it is a single system that is fitted over time, like learning in the real world, to do many tasks.
Yeah, but the problem is just general, like you just said, you build this thing to be good at one a bunch of like one particular thing.
Yep.
And then how do you can you then take it, put it somewhere else, and it's probably going to be like, nope, I have no idea what to do here.
Yeah, so the I think what at some point we got into with transformers is that they're, at least for language specifically, so that's not incorporating any other modalities or modes of learning or tasks. At least there it was not only, okay, I trained this model to say if a document is positive, yes or no, and then in the task that you're doing is representing language in some way, right? So if it's a good model that is generalizable, you would hope that whatever you're doing in this task is actually useful for predicting, I don't know, like some syntax or things about language in general. Or, you know, saying if a particular word is close to another word, these kind of simple operations, that wasn't really possible with these. So the model representation would be hyper specific to whatever task you were training it for. And with very large scale training, which transformer models allow, because you can distribute them over many servers, many GPUs. And so this sort of got NLP research from, it's just one PhD student with like a few GPUs training like these networks for 4 years to do like one specific thing. So okay, now we have like massive amounts of data. Any sort of big tech corporation can just take this and train it like very large scale on a bunch of tasks at the same time. That was also quite an interesting development, where this is multitask learning, right? So you do not only train it to predict like next words, it also encodes somehow the what all the part of speech tags are. You know, if something is a verb or a noun or whatever. It can also say some things about maybe sentiment classification and whatever other things you can plug in there, and it would all encode this in the same main representation. So all these classification parts are kind of modules that you just attach. Okay, I want to do this classification task, this prediction, etc. But you still maintain the same sort of internal main language representation. And this is a very large scale problem for which you need a lot of data and a lot of annotated data.
So I know. So ChatGPT can do multiple different languages, right?
Yep.
So does that mean like it has a sort of a general model of language? Sort of. Do you think it's learned something about language that previously we haven't been able to put into a machine, or is it just?
I think the scale is definitely unprecedented. That is something that is unique to the current line of language models. Is just the amount of text data that we have access to. And so it's on one hand it's this. You okay?
Yeah, no, one sec. Just need to like sign into my library thing, because like if I don't sign in, the damn thing like they kick you out.
Okay.
It's super ridiculous. Okay, anyway,
No
sorry.
So yeah, one is the scale, right? But it's So let's talk about ChatGPT very specifically for a bit. So this the main. What is new in this system is that it's a very very impressive sort of crowdsourcing project.
Wait, hold on a second. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've been trying to tackle like sensible language generation for a while, let's say.
Yeah.
Right. And what is it? And in 2017, this paper came out. Right? Attention is all you need.
Mm.
Okay. So, I mean, first of all, what is attention in that context?
Attention is nothing more than a bunch of matrices with weights.
Okay. And it's just like you calculating, okay, which part of the thing that I just saw is most relevant to the task that I'm trying to do next.
Yeah, whatever relevant means.
Right, exactly. Whatever
Yes.
relevant means, right?
Yes.
So, okay. And then what that paper showed you is that with just that mechanism and like some other stuff is good enough to make like sensible things happen.
Yes.
Right, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Well, it's yeah. So it's indeed high quality language encodings, these attention mechanisms are scalable. That was the most important part.
right. Okay. Yes, exactly. So the biggest part of that is like you can train this on massive data sets and do it parallelly in a efficient way to actually make it useful.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice. Okay. Then from that, and this is the technology that underlies ChatGPT, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So indeed, in basis, we can only hypothesize because we don't know for sure. Obviously,
OpenAI, right?
very very open. Yeah, you're open to pay for their systems at some point.
Very open.
Yeah, but we know that there's at least some GPT variant, and we know what GPT-2 and GPT-3 at least were designed like, because there were at least papers associated to this that you can read. Or at least some blog posts, or there's also work that tries to replicate these systems. So we have a bit more knowledge about this. But this line of research is not super new. So it's not like this, ChatGPT just fell out of the sky.
Exactly. So I mean, it's like most things. It builds on years of incrementally moving from one little thing to another thing.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden there's this stepwise like thing that turns out to be partly because we have so much data now.
Yeah,
and we've managed to make it scalable to train these things.
Yeah, so that is one side of it, and the other side is that once we got into, so these are autoregressive language models, meaning that they transformers for a while just were restricted to predicting something in context, and you couldn't really predict, like, given a context, what is the next thing, or at least it didn't work like that for some bit, like birth or something is restricted. But if you can do like next word prediction, that means that, as I was also alluding to with in the very beginning, you can also generate things. Once you can generate things, you can start doing funky things with the inputs, right? So whatever prompt or context you give the model before it starts generating anything becomes quite important. So before ChatGPT is a funny line of research where people were doing what's called prompt engineering, which is, can I phrase input to this model in a way so that whatever it generates after does something for me? And that could be a classification task too, like, can you, what is the sentiment of the following sentence? And obviously, if it's trained on a lot of data, there's also classification sets in there. There's, it starts picking up on these patterns just from training this model, right? It's not, you never told it to do this. It's a bug, right? In the model itself, you're sort of abusing that there's some language encoding, plus it was also trained on data that might have these kind of things in there. And then you start getting all of these, papers that were just showing like, okay, we actually get very good results if we just let something generate like classification labels for us. It's totally weird. Like, this is not, it's because it's like it's researchers optimizing how to query a model to do work for them, right? It's not like training the model itself. It's training humans so that you correctly prompt it to do a particular classification task. So that's one part of it. So if you hide these instruction sets, as they're called, so these prompts, and you just give that as sort of the initial bit of context, and whatever, you always append that, and then there's whatever you say after. This is sort of what is behind the scenes of many of these sort of chat interfaces. There's like this massive or unknown prompt to make it generate something a particular way, that they worked very hard on doing this sort of engineering of that particular prompt, but it's hidden. So you don't know that actually when you say hey or whatever to to ChatGPT or whatever other GLM, there's actually a massive sort of prompt before so that it responds in a particular way. That is one. So that's one part of it. Second part is that if you just if you can use GPT-3, that's something you can query, and a lot of this prompt engineering was done on. But if you putting this in the wild for people to use is a very risky endeavor. There were many sort of chatbot interfaces before from Microsoft's Tay is a very notorious example.
Yeah, just went online, became immediately racist.
Exactly. So, and
no, actually, so that's super interesting, right? Because what's curious about that is, so I wrote a paper for something about. So I don't use Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. I haven't used it for several years, and my life has been infinitely better. But
yeah, good on you.
but I was thinking about some of the things. I was reading papers about the kind of things that happen on Twitter and Facebook, and so in networks like Twitter and Facebook, the things that get shared the most and are most impactful is not, unfortunately, the truth. It's whatever gets the most novel reaction. So things that generate, the more novel the reaction it generates, that it tends to propagate through the network much faster. Yeah. So it kind of makes sense that put an AI model in there. It picks up on all the things that get shared and gets amplified the most, and it's turns out those are all the things that get people most
yes.
upset and most mad, which is terrible.
So if you let a language generation model get wind of algorithms that push particular recommendations,
right? It's like this weird space where we're putting two completely unrelated algorithms together, and then saying, all right, what happens here?
Yeah.
And one is optimizing to keep you as engaged as possible. Yeah. The other is optimizing to be to learn whatever the pattern that thing is generating. So it's like this. I mean, we're sort of living in this world where it's there are all these interacting algorithms that we sort of built, and we haven't built them. They've all been built in a silo, right?
Yeah.
Tay had no idea about Twitter's recommendation algorithm. It's no idea, right?
No.
So because they're proprietary, right? And so it's just we build them in silos, and then we throw them out into the wild, and it's oh, that's pretty ridiculous, right? And they're oh, of course it doesn't work the way
especially giving it a public platform. So whatever, ChatGPT is also not free from having its less politically correct moments, but you have to share this through a screenshot because it's a direct prompt interface, right? And it's much less overt than putting things on Twitter. Also, they can put up fences everywhere because it's on their system, right? Which is also, that is a very, I think, under recognized part of OpenAI's interface, is that they've I don't know for how long it's been up now, a few months, I think. They've not had a scandal yet.
That's pretty absurd.
Yes.
I was expecting people to there to be reports people go to hospital, because they're taking medical advice from ChatGPT.
Maybe.
I'm waiting. I'm man, what's going on? For example, I played around with it quite a bit, right? Because I was trying to poke it and see where it sort of breaks in a weird instance. So so one thing I did was I described the cat, right, in a very abstract manner, it just in terms of cylinders and cones and circles, right, to a degree that so I asked people the same question, and they were oh, you're talking about a cat.
Yeah.
Right. They're yeah, that's what a cat looks like. ChatGPT did so. I was trying to see how. Okay, I was trying to query its understanding. Does this thing actually understand? But maybe it's a terrible test. But I was okay, let's come up with a description of something that's pretty abstract. But the general person seems to understand. So I put it on WhatsApp groups, and they're yeah, you're talking about a cat, right?
Yeah.
And I'm yeah, that's a cat.
Yeah.
And then I asked the same thing from ChatGPT. He kept asking me okay, not enough information. Can you give me more detail? And then I was oh.
Yeah. No, language models don't know anything.
That's the thing. So I think that is, man, there's so many things we can talk about right now. But okay, let's first talk about that maybe. because people keep asking me. Because like, and I walk around the library now, right?
Yeah.
So okay. So the library is a very interesting environment. Okay. So what's interesting is that if you spend enough time in a place, right, you might think it gets boring, but if you are observant, it gets really interesting because people are super weird, right?
Yeah.
And you start noticing patterns in like human behavior and like things people do that's just crazy interesting. Like sitting in the library for me when I'm working, it's like sitting in a zoo. I was like, man, people are so weird, right? Anyway, so one of the things I observed was like, so there's a different increase in like not so AI students make a very small group of the entire population of Tilburg University, which is a very liberal arts, law, business, social science university, right?
Yep.
So as far as I'm concerned, they're all casuals, right?
Yes, I think that's a fair.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So all this, so there. I see people like on ChatGPT, like as they're reading the law, studying law, or like their psychology, and asking questions. I'm like, oh. And I'm thinking to myself, man, like I kind of want to like tap him on the shoulder and be like, I want you to know, like it doesn't understand anything, like so, like I've seen people like asking something, you give it an answer, and they literally put that answer in like papers, and I'm like, oh Jesus, this is not good.
Yeah,
right?
that's it's a bit of a challenge for us too, right?
Yeah.
As a university to educate students that this thing is nothing more than generator of its training data, and there's very little comprehension there, right? So
that I cannot that I don't think can be overstated enough. Like
absolutely no, it's there's a lot of related research in even before ChatGPT. The most popular one being the stochastic parrot paper, as this is called. It's it's from a few very good authors. I think it was written at Google at the time. Half of the people couldn't be on the paper because there was a whole internal drama around this.
Google is a weird place.
Yeah, so at some point they decided they wanted an AI ethics board.
Oh yeah.
So they hired a bunch of people
and then
that write a paper critiquing their own practices, and that didn't go over very well. You can also imagine that these ethicists are a particular type of people, they typically don't really take shit. Yeah. So anyway, so they published the paper. One of the authors used a pseudonym even, so she could be on the paper, but then, it's not on her actual name. Anyway, so this paper has a bunch of claims or points out a bunch of problems with training very large language models. One is environmental impact. One is impact on sort of marginalization of people. But the main claim, or not the main claim, the main point is that there's no understanding, and it's about overselling AI in a way that speaks to people, right? We're happy to be sort of amazed by these kind of chat interfaces, thinking that it does more than it actually does. You attribute a lot to it. And I think that's also the fault of many machine learning researchers, that we talk about these systems as if they're humans, right? We use all these kind of analogies with the brain and it's thinking, and it's, So you, in language, as in how we talk about these models, you always sort of anthropomorphize these things, right? It's something that we do, and it takes a bit away from the reality of the matter, which is just what they call a stochastic parrot. It's parroting humans with some stochastic processes behind it. So it's really only repeating the training data. There's no larger modes of language learning here, that it abstracts from what it learns, and now it knows things about the world. And obviously the training data is biased in a way. The internet is not a really good place to train on. I think we can all agree that whatever happens in the real world is a lot nicer in terms of conversations and interactions than what happens on the internet, also in terms of content that is available. So yeah, it's
So like well, man. So I used ChatGPT to study for an exam.
yeah.
Right? I wanted to see. I was like, I'm gonna roll the dice on this, okay? Because it was an evolutionary psychology exam, and I was like, okay, how can I use this thing to make my life more efficient, right?
Mm.
So I was like, at least because I knew relying on this thing to answer questions directly was not gonna be useful. So what I did was I showed it all 7 papers that we had to read one after the other, right? And I just asked it questions like, so I was like, but the key thing here is like I had already read these papers, right? So I knew what I should expect. So if it said something ridiculous, I'd be like, that's not in the paper. That makes no sense. But it was actually quite useful because like when I came towards the exam, I didn't have to read the papers all over again. I just gave it to this thing, and I was like, yo, what are the most important, like, I don't know, so when I'm reading the material and I have a question, it's like, okay, what does this mean in this context?
Mm.
And it was reasonable, obviously, but I was gambling. I was like, I wanted to see, like, because I was like, if I get completely fucked, I'll just take the risk. It's gonna be fine, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, let's see what happens. I did fine. I was like, obviously, I'm not saying that GPT was useful in the example. I was saying because I prepared, but there is a place for this thing. I feel like it can be useful because even now the internet is full of examples, like posts upon posts of people saying, "Oh, look at all the cool things I can do with ChatGPT, like all the cool things I can build." Like, okay, fair play, but of course there's risks involved. So like,
absolutely.
What and who has then? What about liability? Like,
yeah,
who's liable?
That's that's a bit more concrete now that Microsoft has invested a lot of money and has also integrated into.
You know what's
Bing.
funny? Like, what's funny is like, I'm starting to realize how shit Google search is now.
Yeah, well,
like
Google's
it's not great.
Main business is ranking pages, right? And there are limits to what it can do with ranking pages. And this is also how we're used to gathering information, right? This is from the sort of beginnings of the internet, and we always wanted to know where the pages are. Like, can I find and then we were happy to go there and extract whatever information we needed ourselves. And that works well if you're sort of a casual internet user. If you ever try to debug something in code or on your system, you know how many damn pages you need to go through to find your answer finally, right? It's like a 1 hour sit down, scrolling Stack Overflow. Yeah. And this was one of the things that I was really impressed by, is like some of my, what would be a pretty large search, it like pretty easily retrieves it, and I can, I know what the answer should be. Is just something that I don't necessarily know right now. I can at least evaluate that it's good and say, okay, great, let's put it in there, see if it works, etc. So in that context, it works very well. And this is where they want to go with like next search, and that's been happening for a while, right? We have these smart assistants that they were pushing on us from I don't know how long ago. I don't know when Siri came out.
ChatGPT Siri would be great, I feel like.
So this is where we want to go in some direction, right? So having these assistants, so we now have the technology to, well, if you're a native English speaker, it works very well. And all the other ones, I'm not sure that the technology is there to really correctly parse whatever you're saying. I think captioning is still, that's a pretty good indicator how far we are with mapping audio waves to actual words. But so this has been developing, and now querying the web via some interface and summarizing that information. That's the sort of next bit that I think we'll get whatever because these assistants aren't really that useful yet, right?
Yeah, they're not. I mean, how often do you use Siri, man? I like
never. I always turn it off immediately once I start it up. So yeah.
Maybe it's like the only time I use it is like to maybe when I'm like cooking and I want to get reminded of something and I don't want to wash my hands, I'm like, hey Siri,
Yeah.
remind me of this. And she's
Exactly.
like,
Set
okay.
a timer for
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, exactly.
That's about it.
That's
right?
about it. Yeah.
And then because you can't really use it for anything else than just retrieving whatever structured information there is already on the phone, right? Weather and these kind of things, which is probably useful for some people. But even dictating an email or something, that doesn't really work that well. You have to post edit it anyway. So it's not like I can be in the car dictating my full email, send it off, and be like, oh, yeah, no worries, I'm gonna.
Yeah, like so. Like,
pretty confident this is gonna be
like,
well represented.
What do you imagine is like you're driving in the car and you say, hey Siri, without even actually having to be specific, like, hey Siri, I got it. Like, can you email Chris and tell him about our change of plans for dinner based on the email I got from Manuel, and then it knows and it goes and looks at Emmanuel's email and it like puts it together and writes this nice email. That's like the future we are sort of imagining, right?
Absolutely. So this is what you see in all these kind of promotional AI videos, right? That these kind of things are reality, and I think we're moving there. Although I should say that it's kind of funny if you think about. Well, it's not funny. It's pretty concerning if you think about like how much goes into just doing these kind of simple operations. It's nice that we can automate all of these things, but there's like massive costs associated to all of these things, not only in sort of computation wise. Mostly you think about power consumption or whatever, right? Like, okay, the servers that these things are trained on and run on are expensive, one. They also consume a lot of powers, two. Three, we don't really have like sustainable power for this. Four is if you plot the sort of energy consumption plus cost plus whatever is needed to scale, this is not only like an insanely big associated cost, it also puts most academic researchers out of developing this. There's no way that if the current trend proceeds, that academia can keep up in terms of resources. So at some point, access to this and like insight into these kind of models is going to be gone if we don't have better scaling alternatives.
Yeah, so a ChatGPT with 10 parameters is it not so like so ChatGPT was trained with on I think like 165 billion parameter network.
I don't know by heart.
Yeah, anyway, but like it's a
massive. Yes.
Yeah, it's massive, right?
Yeah.
So there's a it's not a like a linearly scale like so a ChatGPT the same thing but with just 10 parameters. So is that not like studying how that works? Does that not give you some insight on how the bigger thing works, or is it just a qualitatively completely different beast?
I think a lot of the important points about training these systems is not something that's realistic. So it's not only about fitting the initial model, which is already quite expensive. The trend so far has been more data, more computation power. That's also the Richard Sutton's bitter lesson is that academia always focuses on a lot of clever tricks and optimizations, and then in comes the next generation of models that's just like, we have more compute, more data now, bye. And it works better. Right. See you. So your 5 years of research are in the garbage bin now. So this has always been true so far. Like if you scale up compute and data, you don't need clever tricks. Like GPT-3 is just predicting next word things. It's not really doing like insanely like the architecture is obviously clever, but there's no like very neatly encoded like heuristics and whatever. We really thought about this from a cognitive perspective. No, it's just weights. There you go. Attention are matrices. Bye. And then so yeah, I think that this will. If we don't really have any policy around this, right? It's not like we necessarily care that I don't know for to build all these GPUs, CPUs. We're basically ravaging the planet. It's out of sight, right? It's in countries that we never go and check out wherever lithium is from or something, right? So that's it completely obfuscates whatever is the actual cost to scaling up, right? we're just, and especially from a research point of view, you're just concerned with, okay, what, like, this is a very interesting model. What is this doing now? Okay, we have some chat interfaces. Then we care about how this is going to impact education. Oh no, our students are going to use ChatGPT now. Meanwhile, if this keeps scaling up, we have like just a serious like environmental problem for automating things that aren't necessarily worth automating, in my opinion, at least. So, and there's no policies around this. There's nothing that caps this to, okay, whatever, Google, Microsoft, etc. You had a good run. We stopped caring about scaling this up. Like, let's focus on what we have now and improving that. It's always been a rat race to sort of the next well-performing model, regardless of what that's costing us.
So how do you measure the benefit? The cost seems like it's easy to measure, right? Because in power consumption,
you can objectively measure it.
Yeah. How do we measure the possible upside?
I think it's very difficult. I think a lot of the downsides are so environmentally, etc. It's easily measurable, but I think a lot of impact that these models have on us, also mentally, is very difficult. And I think no one's actually studying this at scale, right? So even from I'll go to the positive part. I just want to
no
go down this.
Because I was thinking like for these kind of things, it's fairly straightforward to calculate the costs.
Yeah.
But the benefits are a little more amorphous. It's kind of hard to wrap your hands around.
Yeah, I think it's also like many of the. So I think
because if you want to balance it out, you want to do a cost benefit balance, right?
Yeah, I think. You can measure. It's difficult because we can measure, for example, productivity for us, right? It's if you want to perform well at your job and stuff, then reducing the amount of time that you spend on things that could be automated is good.
Bring this thing a bit closer to your.
Oh yeah, sure. I'll just go like this. Yeah. So productivity, that's important to us, being in a sort of developed Western country, etc. Going that route is important, so you can measure it that way. What else could you do? Are there things that you couldn't have done before, maybe, if you use these kind of systems?
So one of the things that I find really that I love, it's a double-edged sword, but one of the things that I'm really excited about is the fact that things like ChatGPT or generative models in general, so like models that do like stable diffusion, you generate art and all these things, right? It sort of lowers the barrier of entry for creativity in a sense.
Yeah.
Right? Because like I've dabbled in, for example, drawing, right? And this and all the other stuff. So I like being creative. I like being a creative person, but most of my creativity now has been sucked into schoolwork and just like generating stuff, which is fun. I really like writing code. I enjoy writing papers, but I also enjoy so sometimes I'll have an idea for like an image or like a picture or a piece of artwork that I want to create, but like if you go online and look at a piece of artwork that's done by somebody that resembles the thing that you have in your head, that person took decades maybe to get good enough to make that thing, right?
Yep.
It looks super straightforward, but generating it's super hard. Like if you just look at like one of Escher's like pencil sketches, right? It's like oh, it looks amazing, but it gives us the impression that I could do this. But you try to do it, it's how many lifetimes would it take, right?
Yeah.
So I think it opens up this space where people who are don't have the time, or are just okay. I don't think everyone is creative. Okay, it's hard to be creative like at that level. Okay, but it lowers the barrier. It's like, oh, I want to create this beautiful thing. I have this image in my head, and these tools sort of let you get your feet wet in that creative space to make cool stuff. Right? So that's one thing, but the benefit.
It's a bit about aesthetics, though.
Yeah,
isn't it? It's like I want things to look a particular way, or even with music sound a particular way, and it's like you can harness all these professional productions and particular art styles that people have practiced, but it's all, as far as we're now, it's all just like plagiarism.
So
Soft
like
plagiarism.
So I'm imagining a future where when you log into Netflix, right? You don't search for a show or something. You could.
You just configure one.
Yeah, you configure one. Like so you talk to the Netflix AI. Be like, what are you in the mood to watch? And then it's like, it'll be like, oh, like I really like the Lord of the Rings movies, and they're like, okay. And I was like, what about something like that, but set in space, right? Lord of the Rings in space,
right?
And I want the same sort of characters, same sort of storyline. I want some new enemies, like
bunch of deadpan humor.
Yeah. And then like I want Star Wars X Lord of the Rings, right? And then it'll go off. It'll be like processing. Like it'll do a bunch of stuff, and then it'll be like, your show is ready. And then you watch the show, it's like, holy shit, it's amazing, right? So everyone can be a director. Everyone can be a creator. Like, I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
But like, there is that possibility. Like that's what's interesting for me.
Yeah, I totally get this. I think it's obviously these are very difficult examples, right? This is like, in my brain, this is light years.
Yeah, light years away. Sci-fi, right?
Yeah. It's probably closer than I think, because I'm always very skeptical. But I would find it difficult to think of a scenario where this can be long-term entertainment, because a lot of the things that we watch play into some human sensibilities, and I think a lot of this is something that we have to be very, 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 very far into AI development for, if it ever happens, for this to actually be convincing enough for you to watch.
I can't remember what, but like so when Netflix developed the show House of Cards, they used a bunch of like data science ML things to come up with the perfect show that people want to watch. I could be making this up, but I've vaguely remember reading about this.
All right, and that's like,
and it was a
we
hit
should
show.
Do whatever pacing. And
yeah. So, but like, I mean, that could be coincidence. Like,
but this is more tapping into your brain chemicals, right? That's and that's what they're really good at.
Yeah. So like,
this is feedback from you, so it doesn't have necessarily. Yeah, it could tailor something to you, like cut out a bunch of scenes.
So,
maybe that's.
I mean, the recommendation engine right now is a very low level, like it's like version 0 of this thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like the lowest hanging fruit of
from existing content.
It's like it tries to just do a collaborative filtering or something and be like, okay, here's something you might like.
I think some more short-term things could be these kind of was that Black Mirror that had this sort of dynamic episode?
I didn't like that episode.
I thought it was really cool.
Like I appreciate the idea.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, this is a cool idea.
Yeah.
But part of a movie, I love movies. I love TV shows. I've been a fan. I've been I'm the only child, and like I spend a lot of time alone. Like books and movies and TV shows, like games are my thing, right? And part of like after I spend all day working and doing difficult things, making decisions, the last thing I want to do is turn on a TV show and make more decisions. It's like,
that's fair.
Like, dude, come on, man.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Stop making me work for you. Do your job. Like, why are you making me do your job for you?
Well, that's one way you can approach it. I guess it's also from where do you want the story to go but I can see there's some higher cognitive effort to this. I guess it's also, for me, the story components aren't really that, but I can see how you
Black Mirror was great.
Obsess over I need to make the perfect decision here.
I thought Black Mirror was great. Like, generally fantastic.
Amazing.
Have you watched watched Love, Death, Robots.
Yes.
No, it's so good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The last
So
season
good.
was amazing.
So good. The zombie apocalypse, the miniature zombie apocalypse, that cracked me up. That was so funny, dude. Holy shit. But
Yeah.
like, see,
Some of the, I think that show, apart from the themes, the fact that they get directors for
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
is
yeah.
so good.
it's like short stories. I love short stories.
Yeah.
I love short stories. Like I write short stories, and like that's just fantastic. Right? What the hell are we talking about? Okay, so generative models, like the benefits.
Yes.
Okay, so another thing that comes out of these kind of things is like it's hard to predict where the benefit will show up.
Yeah, maybe it's more of a question for you, because it's I'm always thinking about these things from a very techno-skeptic point of view. So what I always see is there's huge cost to all these things, environmentally, etc. Points that I already raised, and for me, it's always very difficult to imagine things. I always try to imagine, like, who the hell on the other side of the planet cares about all these developments, right? It's all cool for sort of, English speakers and people that have enough money to actually afford having a system to interface with this, etc., etc. And I think a lot of the benefits, and also what you mentioned, so my question will follow after, is a bit more in this, like, away from very basic needs that we still have, right? Like, we're bothered about creativity. Like, oh man, I want to like make some cool music or art. That's the things that I care about. That could be cool. But like, this is not on the minds of many people, right? That they're more like, how do I get through the day?
No, for sure. Like, okay, so I mean,
so can you? So my question would be, do you think there are benefits to these technologies more in a sort of world improving thing, and not for just like the sort of Western elite, but for the planet as a whole?
So what occurred to me, as you were like formulating this question, is that the sort of non-linear nature of how these benefits show up. So let's take an example, right? Let's take Claude Shannon, or I don't know, and pick any one person. Okay, so thousands of people wrote master's theses before Claude Shannon did. Right, they amounted to nothing. No one knows about any of these things.
Yeah,
right. Except the person that wrote them. Now, this one guy showed up, wrote this one thesis about this one thing, which basically shattered pretty much everything else. Like, it's underlies so many of the things that we do, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so to answer your question, it's like I rather have this. Though my mentality is like we should maximize the upside, like maximize the possibility that someone somewhere can somehow, like, I don't think the benefit that shows up is a linear combination of everyone getting some distributed access to this thing and everyone generating a little bit of benefit here and here and there. I think for most people, most of the time, this is gonna mean nothing, right? And then, but for one person, maybe, or for one group of people, it might be so useful that it just like. It's a stepwise increase in any, productivity, creativity, whatever it is, that just cascades through the network and generates a ton of benefit overall. Because most people's activities, most people and most of the activities contribute nothing to, let's say, some metric that we care about, right? Like, you could, let's say you're studying for an exam, okay? And you've read 100 pages, right? 99 of those pages could have done nothing for you. But that just one paragraph on one page might have made the difference between passing and not passing, right? It's like this huge non-linear jump in benefit, right? And that's sort of how this system, like a functional system, let's say like a democracy or like a the system of education we have, sort of, right? So when we, of course, when we educate a lot of people, and it's like we give a lot of PhD opportunities to a lot of people. I think there's the inbuilt into this system is the fact that we are going to maximize on the likelihood that one of those PhDs is going to do something brilliant, right? Because a lot of PhDs will. I mean, first of all, there aren't a lot of PhDs. Like it's like 1% of the population. Yeah, right. but like of those PhDs, maybe they do interesting research. They learn stuff. They contribute. They teach. There's a not net contribution. But if you zoom out, maybe it's just that one person that does something phenomenal that just propagates through the entire thing and improves everyone by a measurable amount, as opposed to the tiny little individual contributions, which are important, but they might not propagate through the network with the intensity that you want to see a measurable increase in everyone's net benefit. So I err on the side of saying, like it's important that we have the possibility of these things happening. And like, I'm from a place which is one of the poorest places in the world, right? And the benefit that I see is that I don't think everyone from where I'm from is capable of doing great things, but there might be one or two people whose lives this could change, and then that could change could cascade somewhere. So I know that was like a long-winded.
No, I get where you're going.
But my thing is on the side of being sensitive to capturing outcomes that are unpredictable but have a outsized net effect on the system as a whole, right?
Yeah.
So I think even though the costs seem huge now, it's hard to predict where the benefit will come from, and we should, I think, err on the side that the benefit will come. So it's an act of faith. It's like, I think it's gonna show up, and I think it's worth investing in this. But we just don't know. The costs are that's why I brought it up. Because the costs are super obvious, but where the value will come from for these kind of things is still not really clear, right?
Yeah. So it's. Thanks for the very elaborate answer. It's very insightful always to talk to.
I don't know. Like that's just how I think. It's just
yeah, that's fair. I think it's a mindset that many people developing AI have to this kind of long term payoff, and it's worth considering. The issue I always have with this is that you're banking on unknowns, where most of the harm that this is doing is very immediate and very concrete and doesn't need to happen. So it's not like, AI is just here, and it's not like it's just going. I don't know what it's doing. It's just whatever. Turn on my PC and things happen, and so we're not in control of the whole distribution chain or whatever. That's all nonsense. It's all effectively looking away to develop whatever project you think is going to work out for humanity in the long term, right? So, and I think this, and I'm not trying to like say you're wrong.
No. This is totally fair.
It's I think a lot of the this particular way of thinking sort of detaches you from thinking about the larger scale impact of things, because you look ahead, right? You think, we have to sort of optimize random factors that could random people could actually turn out to be very good in the long term for humanity, etc. Without necessarily worrying about whatever's happening right now, right? So, and I'm not saying this is not worth pursuing. I think having everyone in a facilitating everyone to maximize their potential, that is very, like, why wouldn't we do that? It
So
would be
okay, wait.
but it's a bit, so the point I'm trying to make is that how many people do you need to shit on before this ever?
Okay, so this is I actually spoke about this with someone recently. It's like, why do so when we when we educate people, let's say, right? Like when we or educate people, or like one of my friends asked me, I'm getting paid to do this research, right? And he said, man, I don't feel like I'm contributing anything to anybody, right? This is just, I'm interested in this. This is curious to me. I'm learning stuff, and like I'm getting paid to do this. I don't feel like I'm generating any value.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, and my answer to him was like, you're probably not, right? I said, and that's okay. I said, the reason that's okay is that because on average, the system still benefits, right? Because even though you yourself might not generate anything, it's more important that we bet on a bunch of people like you that someone eventually will benefit something that is of really importance, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense, that person pays off everything that pays off your dues for you.
Yeah.
Right. And like, that's a system that is capable of leveraging rare but outsized outcomes, right? So like I totally understand what you're saying. It's like, okay, so we have to pay all these costs up front, but we don't know where the benefit is going to come from. And we are sort of saying, okay, well, it's worth it at this stage to do these things, right? And we have to take it at the word of people who are super interested in this. And like, look, no, this is important. Like, when you write a grant proposal, it's like, this is important stuff. Give me money to go research this, right? It's like the probability that like the investment is going to return on anything is almost zero.
Yeah. So okay, let me draw some, because we're doing analogies. So it's a very, very benign example you give, right? It's easy to point to someone who's doing research, and like, it's not like I'm actively kicking people in the teeth like on campus here, right? So, Chris is doing good work. He attacks some students randomly, but I think we're banking on him like turning out well in the long run. That's not what happens, right? It's I'm fairly harmless generally. I hope.
You've been harmless so far.
So and I take, like I have a whatever footprint on life, but it's there's some cost to me existing. But I think it's for on a general level, it's fairly all right. We're sort of localized beings, and we're not doing too many bad things. Some of us are. There's definitely a portion of us that are, but I think the scale particularly is what is an issue here. So I think the system works if you have very it's funny that we go into this whole AI is very societally embedded, right? So these are things that we have to discuss then. But I think the abstraction with the amount of scale that is invested in this is much different from me doing some whatever local.
But isn't this the same sort of argument people had for like going to space? It's like, what's the net benefit of this massive cost to investing in this?
Yes, yeah. This is, but still, like it's not that. There's cost to it too, and I think that is something that we don't do regularly, right? It's not a very active thing. Well, it has become.
No, what I mean is like, I think this is a good conversation, because I think there needs to be a lot of work in sort of quantifying the net benefits of investments like AI. Because the costs are tremendous.
I think so. Also, the point is that going to space is like a one-off thing. That we have some video now of going to the moon, etc. And there's like a whole lot of technology obviously associated to this. But these are sort of rare events that cost a lot of money to develop and then do. Whereas with AI, that's very constant, right? It's something that we are exposed to all the time. You know, unless you're some hermit that doesn't have any access to anything digital, it's still a very, very active component where decisions of a few people affect like many people, right? Not even on like a very abstract or very concrete sort of ecological level. It's more like even influence that they have on you mentally and your behavior, etc. So I think it works a bit different as an example where the impact that this technology has on the entire population plus the planet is significantly it's significantly more impactful than just shooting some rockets in space, right? You could argue the same things. You could say, well, it also, you know, it's also very, not very energy efficient to like blast something into space, etc. A lot of tax money goes into this.
Let's talk like beyond just the raw materials, right? Like it sucks in cognitive capabilities.
That too,
right?
Yeah,
so like some of the smartest people on planet Earth are working on go to space, building AI, all this stuff, right? When then anyone could make the argument like, why aren't you guys solving XYZ problem in this part of the world, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love about sort of say Western countries as opposed to place where I'm from is that you have people have been given the freedom to decide what's important for them. Whereas where I'm from, generally speaking, if you want to go to university, you don't get to decide what you want to do. It's like this is the path you're going to go to. This is who you're going to be, right? And the top brass decides where the benefits comes from. Like what's more important to invest in, right? It's not a distributed calculation. It's a very centralized calculation of this is where what we invest in. Whereas let's say a place like the Netherlands or in the United States, they understand that most endeavors are going to result in nothing, but some endeavors are going to be awesome. I mean, we have to invest in those. But the direct cost of that investment, like you just said, is getting bigger and bigger, right? And like, you know, it's impacting more and more people every day. But AI, okay, so if you compare AI to space, AI is the goal is still very nebulous, right? Like what the hell are we working towards? Like what are we trying to get done that we're spending so much money on and human brain power on?
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, if you ask people, what is AI? How do you define AI? And you ask 10 people, you get 10 different definitions, right?
Yeah.
So what's the end goal and how can we quantify the benefit of that end goal to humanity? And for most people, it'll be like, we shouldn't do AI. It's like, this is going to be the end of everything, right? Like, it'll take over and destroy everyone. And it's going to suck, right?
Yeah.
But your point is well taken, though. Like, how do you justify... that's the question. How do you justify these costs, right?
Yeah.
What's the good way to justify the investment on these things?
Yeah.
And how do you calculate and capture that return on investment somehow?
Yeah.
So I have no idea how to
answer. No, and there's many things that we don't know, right? Especially I'm always worried. I'm a dad of a 2.5-year-old. I'm always worried, like, what is, because I know the younger generations are already, more sort of have been exposed to algorithms a lot more in terms of how your life and whatever information you took in has panned out. I'm worried that at some point there's very little investment in like how do we study effects on behavior and obviously this is not like a unique thing. There were also like a bunch of things that we didn't know before that we now know. Okay, well, if you take a lot of drugs, that's kind of bad for your brain, etc. You know, or it might be good for your brain depending on which ones you take. But it's the speed and distribution though, and that's always the thing. Like, it's such a complex system of one algorithm or one system impacting so many people at the same time in ways that we have no paper trail of whatsoever, right? No one knows what you have. Well, it's maybe in part of your watch history or whatever, but what you've seen over the course of your life or whatever, and how that has impacted your decisions and these kind of things, right? And obviously this goes into very macro level. Well, we also don't know what like whatever political system does with humans and how they interact with each other, etc. So it's not all about optimizing for ultimate good or something. But I do very much worry about sort of long-term unforeseen effects that didn't necessarily have to be the case for very it's a lot of the implementations of AI boil down to making someone some money, right? It's like more views make some particular person a lot of money. That could be beneficial to people watching this content, but it's not necessarily the case, right? Most entertainment is sort of not really that cognitively developing content. So
when I applied to a bunch of programs and for masters and stuff, and so it forced me to think about like why I care about AI, right? And which is actually at first I was annoyed because I'm like, why do I have to write this thing over and over again? But like it was like a very ended up being quite a meditative exercise. Like, why am I doing this, right? And as far as I'm concerned, it's like problems are evenly distributed in the world, but the ability to solve them is not, right? It's like if you sample the population of a university, right, the concentration of PhDs here as opposed to PhDs back home, it's not even close, right? Or like even engineers or whatever it is, right? You like the ability to solve problems is not scalable. It's not been, at least. Like, I mean, the only way we've been able to scale it is in terms of corporations and businesses who can make products that solve problems or things like that. Anyways, the promise for me there is that you can democratize these abilities to places that can't afford to have the actual brains there to do it for you. One amazing example is diagnosing diabetic retinopathy. So like you can diagnose you can diagnose so diabetes causes damage to your blood vessels, right? And you can diagnose it through the eye, which generally requires a trained physician or like a big thing and a techniques, right? But with the deep learning algorithm that you can put on the phone with a flashlight, people in Africa and India and Sri Lanka can go to a freaking optometrist and get their eyes diagnosed for retinopathy, right? Which makes it almost free. Like it's insane how cheap it makes it, right?
Right.
So we've basically taken that knowledge and skill and scaled it up, democratized it to people that wouldn't be able to use it before.
Yeah.
Which and that's the promise that I find that I think is really important and really interesting. A place where the ability to scale and problem solving ability to places that wouldn't otherwise be able to get them. All they need is a processor and internet, and then they can do it.
Yeah,
that's something I feel like we can expect a lot of return from in terms of this investment.
Yeah,
but like you said, it makes anything you use, these mics, everything's been made because it makes someone some money, right?
Yeah.
But it contributes to the net effect of whatever this is going to be.
Sure.
I don't know if you've lived in this is a very interesting experience. So when I was living in Sri Lanka, I had this experience of walking into this feeling. So this feeling of paying for something, right, and then getting and this experience of paying for something and feeling like you got the value you paid for is not a common experience back home, right? Because there's a bunch of costs that are associated with it that gets transferred onto you. That you buy something, you're like, why? This is preposterous. Why am I paying so much for this thing, right? It sucks, right?
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. And also, if you go to a store and if you want to get something done, right? And you go to a store to buy something to help you get that thing done, if that thing exists, there's a feeling of being part of, the environment is sort of set up to help you do the things that you want to do. When you go to a store and nothing you want is there, it's been my experience for a while. It's a qualitatively different experience as to what you have here.
Yeah.
But here, of course, you have that because people pursuing their own profits. They go out and start businesses and do stuff, build stuff because people want to buy those things, right? And a lot of those businesses fail.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses fail. How many companies went into business to make mics and they all failed? But the net benefit is we get to have awesome mics from some company, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why I brought that up is because I forgot what we're talking about, to be honest. But that's what AI promises for me. For people to be at home in Sri Lanka, man, this fucking sucks. I need to build something. And collaboratively work with an intelligence to build something new that wasn't there before. And I think this might be a stepping stone to those. Generative models gets me really excited. Because now we're starting to see a way to augment human generative capacity with a machine to give people that couldn't generate stuff at all before a chance to generate stuff that could actually be useful.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to, I think, 2 points. One, tying into if it's not necessarily harmful that people make money out of this, right? That is, if it's capped at some point, we're in the clear. I think the fact that we don't have limits on this at the moment, I think, is rather problematic in many terms of many things are scaling to degrees that we didn't foresee. And so
this is a concern with AI is any tech sort of thing, right?
I think any economic or whatever thing is
one actor gets almost all the benefit from so Microsoft builds this AI, it's their AI, and they get 99% of the users, and everyone else gets completely
exactly. Yeah. So this is also a bit of a natural way that things behave, right? But so it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So I think and there's more money, unfortunately, in developing the next Bing than there is in doing medical research with AI, right? That's just because people like investing a bit more in their day-to-day things than they do in whatever happens in 50 years to them, right? It's a bit more of a immediate payoff.
That's that's a hell of it's a human beings are not great at long time horizon things. It's hard.
No, even not in their own lifespan, which is really weird.
It's really weird.
Yeah. But so and I think if none of this has to necessarily go away, right? I think you do need indeed very massive efforts that need to be financed somehow, right? There needs to be some incentive to dedicate much of your time and cognitive effort to a particular thing that then might benefit many people, and a good incentive is money, right? So that's what we will end up with anyway. It's just an unfortunate byproduct that sort of the not necessarily even ethical, but just sort of process regulating portion is always very small, and it's usually seen as, well, you're just disallowing us to grow in these particular directions. And you see that in many of these larger companies, that it's a bit of a window dressing thing, that they attract people to think about their systems. That's not necessarily what they want. They just want to develop this further and not necessarily think about improving ways that might be costly to them. So it's you know, these are very complex questions and issues, exactly because it's so intertwined with our ways of governing economics, etc., that it's you know, who am I to even talk about this, right? I just care about if these systems are harmful, yes or no. And then you start reading up on this and you're like, okay, well, I might as well do an extra PhD in philosophy and economy and whatever to even be informed about this, so right?
It's like,
it's crazy.
The landscape we operate in is fundamentally changing, I think. It's like we used to operate in a landscape of just human beings and that's sort of it, like in terms of like the intelligences that we had to contend with, right?
Yeah.
Now there seems to be there's a bit of a shift. It's like the human beings, this is the thing, all right? So human beings, if you just think of each human being as an agent, right, like a trained agent, right? We're not trained in silos, right? If you are like a reasonable, if you had reasonable parents and you had like a non-horrific childhood, right? You grew up with other agents, connected loosely in some way, say culture or family or whatever it is, and you sort of like your weights, the weights of your network were modulated by the behavior of these other agents, right? Algorithms are built in silos to perform a very particular task, to do very particular thing, right? And for the first time, we have some semi-intelligent agentish thing that's out in the wild, but that's not been modulated by anything else around it, right? It's just train this little thing, and same like with the Microsoft bot and the Twitter bot, right? There's us, there's these two things, and all of a sudden, like when those two things interact, they interact very differently as opposed to the rest of us interact, because we are part of a network. Those things were built completely devoid of any of that stuff, right? They're very focused on one thing, and then they come out and interact. And you get these unexpected behaviors. It's like, what the hell is this thing doing, right? Yeah. So that's something I'm like a little bit concerned about. Like they're gonna see things that we just didn't expect, like harms that show up out of nowhere. Like what the hell? Like,
yeah, for sure. It's it's optimizing for one thing, and then you also have this with automated driving or something. Then we thought that was an easy task. Turns out that you actually have to deal with all the noise that is the world.
Yeah.
And then people crash their car.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that we were trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Right. But even as you said, unpredicted things that who knows what there are for sure people that have fallen off some end somewhere because of some algorithm recommending them particular videos or particular content, etc. And I think we can expect exactly the same with, whatever you open up to people to interact with, and we're not really equipped to judge the value of this, or like what is, just backing off to a very simple example, just you studying for this exam using this sort of text synthesis software. Let's say that you would completely trust whatever this system is saying. You're just out of time. You just need to study for this exam. This is the way that you chose to do it. You mess up the exam. This makes you fail your studies. let's say, right? We're not that harsh here, fortunately, but like, let's say that happens. It could have like immeasurable consequences on your life, right? Just because at some point you decided to use some misinformed system.
Yeah.
And part of this is just we need to adapt, right? As this is not going to go away in the immediate future, so we have to. And I'm worried a bit about this, because even informing people about what things like misinformation are and what that there's people that thought about this, and there's certain facts, actual facts. Actual facts about
real news.
Yes,
news.
the truth.
The truth.
Yes. And how to discern this from things that might be less proven, or plain wrong, is already a huge societal problem, right? And that we already see that creates polarization and all these weird effects from something quite, benign. Like I just show you a bunch of articles that have some little like crackpot theories in them, and if I keep on doing this and I can convince you to take this seriously, which is exactly what's happening, right? Then, and I'm not saying that is necessarily something, oh, this is what is actually the truth and you should be into this. It's just this effect that it has on society is already like very clear now, just talking to family or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So like this it's like this personalization bubble, right?
Yes.
It's like your Netflix is personalized, your YouTube is personalized,
Yeah.
The Google search is
and
personalized.
no one has insight in, like,
Yeah.
no one knows why that's happened. Well, we know it's a recommendation system.
So also, like, ChatGPT is not like, it's not deterministic, right? Like if you and I asked, and if you and I sat down and asked the same things on two different occasions, it won't give you the exact same answer.
No, it's a very good point. No, probably not. Well, let's say, I think to some extent it might be deterministic, but there's no way that that's going to be the case for the long term. But then again, many systems aren't deterministic. Like search engines aren't deterministic. There's different ways that Google ranks pages based on not even your you and your search history, which you would like, right? They tailor it to the things that you find important and rank it for you. It's also localized in a way that it picks up on particular things. This paper showing this, that from being from some region gives you different, completely vanilla Google account. Gives you different results than
for sure. I mean, I knew Google was watching everything I did, but it was super salient because Google has this hidden coding challenge that so based on your search history and like the interaction with Google, they send you this, like, let's say after a while, I don't know, this happened like sometime last year while I was like working on some piece of software. I typed in a search engine, and all of a sudden this, underneath the search bar, this weird thing showed up, and it's like, there's a challenge that you might be interested in taking, and if you take the challenge and you pass all 3 stages, you get interviewed for a job at Google, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, part of me was like, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I
got profiled to hell right there.
And then and part of me was like, Jesus Christ, like,
yeah,
this is not what I asked you to do for me.
No,
I didn't ask you to do this, right?
No.
Like, this is like, why?
Yeah. And that's in the personalized domain. So, which is that's already a whole thing in itself. And I don't think that there's obviously like many guardrails on this, right? Like they don't want you. We're working on some research right now. I can't really divulge much, but there's definitely things to the search engines that even from having no information from you other than where you're from, is already like biases the hell out of you. No, I should. That doesn't bias the hell out of it. It shows some signal.
See,
that you would assume that this is a neutral system. You would hope that if you use it, then it will give you things that are still balanced, right? Like I don't want to I don't want to be in a bubble. I don't think many people want to be necessarily in a bubble. It's just an effect of the algorithm. But a priori, it's already doing this kind of stuff, which is totally weird. Like this is, well, it's not weird. It's explainable through however they set up the system and what they expect users to do. And obviously that there's revenue tied to this. So then we get into what makes more money is that, like, how do I maximize people using a particular search engine that's giving them effective results? What are effective, etc. So
So like, again. I mean, if it works, people will use it, right? Generally speaking. But like, okay, I think I wanted to ask you about Codex, GitHub Copilot. So that's way more useful for me than ChatGPT.
Same, absolutely.
Like, so there's this again. So this comes back to the generative models. This whole thing where it's like, what I realize is like, if you're bad at coding, if you're not a developer, if you're not a programmer, I'm not a developer by any. Okay, first of all, I'm not a developer by any stretch of the imagination. Like I've been around like actual people who develop software for their day job, and like it's a different ball game, right? But if you don't program, you don't know how to program very well, it's not that useful, right? But if you're like a reasonable programmer, it makes you so efficient. Like, cause like I don't have like because I have this. So when I'm writing like a fairly complicated piece of software, it's like I have the idea of what I want software to do. I don't want to have to like write these loops and like write these little pieces of like little tiny little subroutines that I need, right, to get this thing done. I can just say hash this function takes in a matrix, takes in two matrices, calculates the covariance matrix, and then tab here's this. Okay, cool, plug that in, it works. Like, damn, that's so these models have the capacity to make people who are already productive insanely productive.
Absolutely.
And then it's like flatten out. It's like putting a filter on a Fourier transform. It's like certain frequencies, boost them up, and then everyone else gets decapitated.
Yeah.
Because if you're like okay, so I actually worked for this. I knew this guy who was working for this law firm, and they're super interested in this stuff, right? They're super interested in language models, particularly because like a lot of a lawyer's time is spent reading, right? Reading briefs, synthesizing stuff, writing arguments, right? Like that's the lawyer's day job.
Yeah.
And these kind of like an advanced version of ChatGPT, like tailored for like a law firm or just their own data, will like eliminate 90% of the lower level jobs.
Yeah.
And be like, if you're an amazing lawyer, you're gonna be there, and you can take on even more clients. You can make even more money. But if you're like an average person, you're pretty much fucked, right?
Yes.
And like one of my friends emailed me and he asked me, "Hey man, do you think we can use ChatGPT to make a chatbot for our executives, just trained on our financial data, so that like they can ask questions like, what was last year's earnings, like taking into account factors A, B, C, right?"
Absolutely.
And I was like, holy shit, that's And that's someone's job, right?
Yeah.
That's like a intern's job.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Managing portfolio.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So like, the winner take all problem is way more amplified in this AI situation.
I think a lot. Yeah. I think but you touch on a point that is also like most of the what we call grunt work or whatever, right? That is to a large extent out of the window. Plus very complex search operations. Exactly like you said, if I have to go through massive amounts of financial data and also like not being really knowledgeable about this, because otherwise you have your system set up, right? You can query this and it's fairly easy. And there's for sure software that can do this, but just off the formulating things that aren't necessarily coded in, that's for sure a cool productivity development. And then for coding, I'm also like, this is fantastic. I don't have to think about many of the things. But the point is, though, that to confirm if this works is legit, and especially in a law setting, you still need a bunch of experts, right?
Yeah.
I still need to have done all this like really boring, follow the Python course, and then like I do some advanced stuff and whatever, and then, otherwise I can't evaluate if it's actually correct.
Yep.
And that will never go away, right? We're just so some of the very tedious work, but that's what programming to a very large extent already did. We have automated a lot of things in our lives that we don't need to worry about anymore. Filing taxes in the Netherlands, it's great. Like most of the things are automated. It's fantastic. Like if you ever need to then after returning from this have to like fill in this whole booklet with your own financial information, like, I don't want this. We have better systems. It's fantastic. Why didn't we already automate this? So this is just another sort of abstraction layer on top of that, right? So I think for these sort of constrained scenarios, super useful. Still need someone to interpret it, though.
Yeah, true. It's like to know if what ChatGPT is saying is correct, you already have to know what the hell he's talking about.
Absolutely, right? And if you query it for expert information, you have to actually be an expert to evaluate if it's good, yes or no.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So like how do you trust these models? How do you this is a real problem, right? Like how do you generate trust how do you trust other people?
Yeah,
right.
There's a very famous, not really famous, I think locally famous in my subdomain, but that under no accuracy are models ever safe to implement in like fully automated decision making. Exactly the same reason why you wouldn't want to put like someone in charge of many people without any checks and balances, right? We don't do that in the real world, so why would we want to do that with something that's automated, non-transparent, etc., right? I can at least query you, right? Walk up to you and ask you like, why the hell did you do this?
Yeah.
This is not good, man.
Yeah.
And you have some, like, let's hope they have some morals and whatever, and then you feel bad about messing something up. With these systems, I ask them why, and then
there's no idea.
No, it's like, nope, don't know. The weights, man, they made me do it.
Yeah.
So, true. And then, so can you ever implement this? Like, are we ever sure, safe, even with like ChatGPT, very good example of something that's completely over-engineered not to mess up, right? Like you want things to, it's obviously in a huge feedback loop with whatever the users are doing. But the amount of guardrails they had to put on this to, as we talked about before, not have this sort of PR problem eventually. So it's not, that also requires a lot of effort thinking about what might it potentially do. And then even then, you're never sure that it doesn't go off some like very weird local minimum and generates
so
like a bunch of...
If something happens and then you ask OpenAI or Microsoft, why did this model say this?
I don't know.
They'd be like, I have no idea.
No, they can there's obviously techniques for interpretability, etc. And then there are some, we have some cues, but it's never, and that is, if you're an ML researcher, you can apply this and look at it and then think about it very hard. No one's going to do that for every output, right? This is like some...
What do you think about them putting this out in the wild, like as ChatGPT? Ballsy, right?
Very ballsy. Yeah, but it is, that's why I also said it's the language technology isn't necessarily very impressive. It's just the fact that it works still. It worked quite well and hasn't messed up.
Yeah, the engineering is pretty...
It's unprecedented, right? Yeah. It's such a... And obviously with this also comes a bunch of these costs that they've apparently hired. I forgot what country was exactly. I want to say Nigeria, but I don't think it's that. $2 an hour to annotate like a bunch of toxic content so that it at least wouldn't produce that, right? It's a problem that's been worked on in academia for, I don't know, who knows how long, because like online moderation is a very big part of whatever was missing in social media for a very long time. And they just whatever, they just did it in secret, like paid almost basically peanuts for annotating all this data, and just to make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen, right? So it's it's for me, it's always a bit like, this is exciting, but there's this sort of very bitter aftertaste to whatever's happening.
Sure. So online moderation, right?
Yeah.
What is the current landscape in terms of AI and content moderation online? Like, let's say like Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that you pick up on this particular thing. It's there are a bunch of articles and documentaries that have laid out what the reality of the matter is, which is that there's massive teams just doing manual content moderation, even though a lot of these platforms like to claim that they've automated this. A lot of it is still, or was at least. I'm not sure what the current state is, because OpenAI, open part. But this is a very difficult problem. It's I know, because I did research on it for a while. Not only detecting if something is harmful by the text itself, it's a very it's a socially embedded problem, right? It's who sends this to whom. In what context? Where are they from?
Yeah,
is it acceptable language in the culture that they're from?
Like if you try to content moderate my conversation with like my best friends,
exactly,
you'd flag
is that necessary?
You'd flag every other word. It's
exactly,
like what
exactly.
This is the bullying.
Yes,
harm,
harassment.
Harassment.
Yeah,
what's going on? But then you look at the context, like, oh, they've been
they're
friends.
They're friends. It's fine.
They've been friends for 25 years. Like,
yeah,
okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. And then that's a lot of the context that's usually missing. But also, many other factors like also time, right? Like language evolves in the way that some words are now really offensive, whereas they were totally acceptable in some whatever niche. And
some words are invented, like tweeting.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of language creativity going on. Languages develop, etc. That's a bit of a long-term problem for all of NLP, I guess. But like content moderation is a very nice sort of embedded problem, which is why it's really popular to work on too. And it's very difficult to it's very difficult to do it correctly, because realistically, we're not these social media platforms, right? As academic researchers, we don't have access to the data they have access to. And a lot of the problems that we just described would require information about who talks to whom, what frequency. Is it usually positive, whatever they're sharing? Do they know each other in real life? So you could do location, proximity, all this kind of like very surveillance things, just to prevent people sending each other nasty messages online. So yeah, I think a lot of this research is also quite misrepresented, that you claim that you have like some very high you just get a benchmark with like a little test set. People say, well, we scored 0.5 higher than the previous paper, so yay. But actually nothing is solved with this. It's just a little toy task. If you ever deploy it in the wild, it doesn't work, or at least it didn't. I'm not sure if OpenAI has done some magic thing to avoid this. I would assume no. And it's also very different from filtering it out of some generative system over filtering it out of human communication, because you can predict what you have access to the distribution of whatever encoded language is, right? Encoded language like, and from that filtering, it's much easier. Whereas detect, like, if you get into the online harms and sort of content moderation domain, it gets really adversarial. If I'm a notorious toxic person online and I get flagged, I know, okay, I shouldn't say these things this way. I want to continue though, so let me change my language in a way that the system doesn't pick up anymore. And you get into this whole sort of arms race into like
you start doing symbols and like
exactly
letters and stuff.
Exactly. So that's it's a really interesting problem, and I think it's somewhat of an unsolvable problem to some extent.
Yeah. So it's like in video games they try to deal with this quite a bit, like trying to, because you don't want to have a toxic environment because that makes people stop playing the game and that's not good for business, right? So you want to try and make it as peaceful as possible. And I think so like Dota 2, at least the game I'm familiar with, the answer they have is like put all the toxic people together in one place and then separate everybody else from these people, right?
Yeah.
So instead of trying to moderate and trying to figure out what the hell they're saying, it's like you let people rate each other and then you put all the ones who got shit ratings together and then put them in their own little hell and then let everyone else like live their lives.
Yeah.
Which I was like, oh, it's like virtual prison. That's kind of interesting.
Exactly. And I guess that works for games like Dota, where you have small games and you can like people need to amass in some small room, and that works fine. And unfortunately, the web isn't like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like it didn't occur to me like how much of the web is language, right? It's like it's most of the web is
for sure
human like natural language, right? So dealing with the web is basically a huge NLP problem.
Yeah, for sure. There's also many layers of sort of metadata and higher level information that we don't necessarily. That's kind of the semantic web type of deal. But yeah, a lot of Web 2.0 is content creation by humans and like talking to each other, right? So that is mostly, there's obviously a lot of video content that also contains language. In essence, this is text and language, right? But also the interactions and stuff. We typically forget that it's still a communication platform, right? So all the information that we usually have about interactions is actually encoded in there in some way. We usually just don't see that because it's like a hardware-based thing.
So one interesting thing of like of generative models particularly is like you can now. So there are companies that you can just like get photos of generic people, right? Like if you're a fashion designer, if you're like a fashion person, like man. That's something. It's like you go online and you just like build this person that you want, and then you put the clothes you want on it, and like this person doesn't exist. It can't like, man, that's craziness.
Yeah. It's these these are the generative avenues. I think with visual stuff it's really easy to do it really well. There's still like notorious whatever things that it's not good at, like hands.
Oh yeah, the text in images is kind of hard.
Exactly, these kind of things, and doing hair like exactly correctly. But I don't know how long they took to model this correctly.
But like
in video
now,
games,
man,
so.
things they do are crazy. Like I haven't had a console since the PlayStation 2. So like, because I'm a recovering addict. Like video games, man. That's like that's my drug. Like I'll play that shit all day. Like when I start playing video games, nothing else is interesting. Like I don't like going out. I don't like working. Like everything is less fun than video games to me.
I had my time too when I was younger, but
so I can't do that. But like the level of detail that people. So there's this general endeavor of like creating an abstraction layer of reality on top of the reality we're living in right now, and language plays a huge part in that. I feel like, generating language, understanding language, passing it, like making sure people understand what's happening.
Yeah, and the effect that this will have on language use is also really interesting, right? Like let's say that on a grander scale, everyone decides to rewrite or like improve their theses or something, or essays or papers or whatever writing you do using these kind of systems. You get into that shapes your vocabulary like a lot, right? If you never read anything.
Oh, that's interesting. You mentioned it's super interesting because like, so Notability has like the app that I use on my iPad. you can select math equations and then convert into like nice math, like you write it by hand, convert it into math, right?
Yeah.
And because I want that to work well, I have changed my handwriting so that like it can adjust, it can pick it up better.
Yeah.
Right. So like I completely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I'm obviously, like, a lot of linguists would argue that the things that you're exposed to in day-to-day conversation and television, etc., are much more salient than things that you just see on a screen and you improve and things. But there's definitely a subset of people that are only exposed to English via the web. And so if you change to a large extent and there's people researching this in the department too, to what kind of vocabulary you're exposed to, that shapes your language use over time, right? And I'm wondering if could also have positive impacts, like if we get like a lot of examples of well constructed sentences based on our own writing. If we could gradually improve this, that would be interesting. I'm not saying that happens, because
it'd be interesting. Like if once people start using, let's say people are using ChatGPT to improve their essays, right? And over time, you see that like they're all converging to one writing style.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Then you're like, oh, that's ChatGPT writing style. Like, you know.
Yeah, it does definitely has a signature, very boring writing style. But it's I mean, I'm not saying like, this is your ticket to being like a very creative writer, and it's not like if you read all the literature in the world that you're now like a very good writer. It definitely helps, but you still need to pick up on things that happen in the writing and be interested in creative writing and constructing particular things and playing around with language to even bother doing this, right? So I'm not saying that it's gonna make us all better writers, but there'll definitely be some effect on writing, and also the things that we, some information that we're exposed to. There's definitely some things in what ChatGPT generates that are controlled somehow, right? It's Silicon Valley based, or with Microsoft, there are particular values that are imposed on this system, right? You can make jokes about men and about but women, it's like, no.
I didn't know that.
I don't do that.
That's pretty funny. I did not know that.
Yeah. So and I get where that comes from, right? Because you have to take into account what sort of the toxic population is that might abuse this to whatever extent, and hence you have to take into account these particular variables. But yeah, now it becomes a bit more like a political thing, right? Like, do we want to use some system that only adheres to this political agenda and what would be proper behavior?
I think it's also important to be like these things are not vanilla, like plain objective things, right? They bring our inbuilt like ideas and biases and all these things
absolutely
to their production of language.
Yes, and avoiding that is many layers of also biased rules, right? Heuristics to not make it do particular things, because we generally see these as undesirable. So it's a very interesting sort of reflection of our language use, plus all the biases and all the not so nice people on the web, and then trying to filter this through sort of as harmless as possible, some rainbow filter, basically. It's very interesting, and that to a very large extent also shapes how you interact with it, right? So there's much like you overfitting to your personal assistant, like Siri or whatever. I'm only going to use it for these things because that works. This will do the same, right? Like you'll figure out that some things just don't work, so you're not going to use it for that. And to a large extent, that also shapes interactions and whatever information, language, etc. you get out of it. So again, we go into the whatever effect it has on sort of larger scale interactions and our behavior, etc.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, like so. Well, man, it's been almost 2 hours. I'm sure you have actual things to do today. But
I have a bit more time. But yeah.
But like last thing I wanted to ask was like, because I did look I looked up like some of the papers you wrote and like the content moderation and sort of identifying like how to make the internet less of a hellhole to interact with, which is a huge part of language, right? Like internet is so much language and like so it feels like to me, you know, we are all sort of taking a part of being a human and then trying to deal with it, right? So like vision researchers are like, okay, vision is a huge part of how we interact with the world. We need to put money in this thing. Language is like probably the next biggest thing. It's like how the hell do we, like, hearing, perception, communication is like the next big thing, right? For human beings, right? And like, what do you like? Is there anything that's exciting for you in terms of natural language processing, and like anything that excites you in the sense that like this could be something interesting to go down a path?
That's a good question.
put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I think the problem is that I'm not necessarily very involved with NLP per se, or I know that my research is mostly NLP, and I. So
what do you care? What applications are you particularly interested in? Like, and in terms of applying these things to?
Most of my especially recent research has been in applying ML and NLP systems to subvert NLP systems, which that is to me a very interesting line of research. So that is, how do I so mainly stuff I've worked on is how do I not reveal information about myself in my writing. So not necessarily the things that I write, but the things that can be inferred from my writing style.
Yeah, like J.K. Rowling.
Author information, yeah. Exactly. Like, and that's inferring identity, but it could also be things like you write like someone who's from the Netherlands, speaks English, is educated in this and this, probably has this kind of income, you look like you're mentally stable, you have I don't know, introverted personality, whatever. And these are all things that there are papers predicting all of these things about just from your writing style.
That's crazy.
It's very scary to me. Yeah. I worked on this I worked on online harms for a while. And one of the things that we wanted to do was detecting adults talking to minors online. So trying to moderate those conversations, or like end them at least. So what do? You try to predict the age of the writing based on age of the writer based on the text they input. And the thing with adults talking to minors that don't necessarily have good intentions, that they try to mimic the language from like the younger person, but they can't. There's always indicators in their language use that reveal that they're old.
Like what?
Vocabulary or certain sentence constructions that a 14-year-old doesn't come up with.
Right.
Using periods after this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Punctuation.
Exactly. Yeah. Just it's a very blatant example, but for sure, these kind of things. Particular emoticons were also.
No, it's funny. Like
do a little nose in a smiley. Old.
Yeah. Like and you know, your writing reflects the way you think in it. Like because like so one of the like a piece of advice that I got a while back is like if you can write clearly, then you can think clearly. Like because you have to, because it reflects when you write something out, it reflects your thinking process.
Absolutely, and
Right.
it also it reflects a lot of your world state, right? Like how were you brought up? What things were you exposed to? What things do you know? What things do you not know? And so it actually reveals a lot of information about you that can be automatically inferred. And the path that we're going down on is that it becomes a lot easier to train these kind of models that do this inference. So before it was, you needed like annotated data because you have to do supervised learning. So I need your Twitter profile or whatever. You don't have social media, but some other person's.
Yeah. I mean, I have a Twitter profile because I had to make an account to get some data for it.
There you go. Okay, so okay.
Yeah. Just to be technically accurate.
Yeah, and then some human labels, some predictions, maybe some indicators that you actually self-report particular things. And you needed to collect this, annotate it, pay people to do that. Train an expensive ML system, and you would actually need to be some researcher of some kind, right? So by resource exclusion, it already safeguards people from these things. Although now with then it would put it more in the hands of companies can do this, etc. They definitely do also do this because it's a way to serve you ads more effectively, for example, if they can profile you correctly.
Right.
And then you don't necessarily need to give all this information in terms of whatever you like or Facebook was very big on harvesting all this sort of metadata about you, shows and music, etc. that you liked. They can just do it from your writing style. So, but if any individual can just infer things about you using these kind of systems, that puts you in a pretty peculiar spot if you don't want to reveal particular information, right? And that, like, your age is a bit, that's not too bad, right? But if you're, let's say that they want to predict your political leaning based on your writing style in some oppressive regime where that actually has pretty severe consequences. You could be thrown in prison for not supporting whatever is the dominant political party there. Yeah, that could be quite scary, right? Like this actually has real world impact. And so because of this, I got interested in, can we rewrite whatever we input in a way that you don't reveal this information anymore? So it's a very complex NLP task, actually, because now we have to change writing to something that still needs to convey the same message. And we don't necessarily have metrics for this. We don't have a metric. We have some for machine translation or whatever that show, this is quite close to the original in terms of word overlap or semantic, whatever we think semantic similarity is. So is the meaning the same? And that's usually based on some model too. So these are all quite vague. And then you try to do this, right? So you try to rewrite. It's sort of like maybe some sort of style transfer textually, if you're familiar with that. Ideally making it as neutral as possible. And what is a neutral writing style? That's not like an actual concept, right? It's always colored somehow through whatever. So you try to get, and the annoying bit too, like another additional layer of complexity, is that you usually don't really have the model that you're trying to like attack in this way, as we would phrase that. So you launch some adversarial attack on this model, but you don't necessarily have access to the model. So you need some substitute to inform you about these things, and then hope that whatever attack you launch then generalizes to some other system. So this is all really highly complex. I unfortunately only spent half of my PhD on it because I have obviously I have a ton of ideas now, but a bit less time.
See, this is why we need AI. We need someone to implement all the ideas that we have no time for.
Yeah. So now I need to get other people to be interested in this. But I think these kind of techniques also they propagate into other interesting areas. So, writing style or presentation of information somehow, you can also apply that to things like the news. Like, is the news showing particular coloring of some sorts? Do they paint like a sort of diverse picture of things in terms of who they talk to and which examples they give? Can you measure if particular information is politically biased or is written more in a style that caters to males, or these kind of things? So it has really broad applications. Not necessarily the tinfoil hat bit that I'm very interested in.
Oh man.
Yeah, but that's what I'm, and the better these models become, obviously, the better they become at like sabotaging themselves. So I think but that's a bit of an atypical thing to say, that, oh, I'm really interested in how like I'm gonna break these algorithms in the future. But this is what I research, so yeah, that's what I'm.
That's cool. No, like language is I've been writing since I was a little kid, right? And I've been slowly like written short stories, like never had like the idea or the motivation to write a whole book. I have no idea what I would write about, but I enjoy writing. And like one of the things that really leaves me at odds in a place like Sri Lanka is like, I want to say what I want to say. Right? I want to write what I want to write, and I want to think what I want to think. Like, one of my guy I know personally is facing 10 years in prison for writing something that could be interpreted as saying a monk is gay. Right? It's a fictional short story.
Yeah.
And there is a way to interpret what he wrote in one paragraph as showing that this monk in this short description is a homosexual. Right? And I was like, no, this is not, I just like, that was not the place I wanted to live in. And for me, language is a gateway to my mind, right? And I want to be able to express what's on my mind through language to whatever degree that I want to do it, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, I do it in a context of other people, right? And this content moderation thing is probably next, it's close to my heart because, like, I recognize the problem, but the solution we're coming up with may not be the solution that we want.
No, I absolutely agree, and it's very closely veering to censorship too, right? So then it's who the dominant system implementation organization or corporation is that then controls what's the truth, what is acceptable, yes or no, and that I don't think we should ever go there.
Yeah, it's rough, man. Yeah. Like but it's good that we have people like you who are thinking about it, because like otherwise we'd have all this we'd just be like, oh no, this is great. Like, clearly this is bad. This is wrong. Like stop that shit. And what makes communication worth having is that you can have communication that you learn something from, and you can't learn something from anything if you always get what you expect.
No,
right? There's no learning happening there. No, it's kind of hard.
No. So we also don't want to be in a language bubble.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, this has been great.
Yeah.
I think let's wrap this up. But because like I'm running out of juice.
Same. Yeah.
And this has been awesome. Like, so I don't even know how I would start to write the intro for this podcast because we talk about everything.
Yeah.
But thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for the invite.
Let's do this again soon,
fun.
For sure. Thanks, man. All right, catch you soon. Thank you for listening. I hope to see you again next time.